UFC is back this week. This upcoming weekend, we've got UFC Denver. Rose Namajunas taking on Tracy Cortez. It was supposed to be Macy Barber instead of Tracy Cortez, but things happen. She falls out. Tracy Cortez takes the short notice opportunity. I think it's still going to be 5 rounds for the main event, which is impressive taking it on short notice. But we've got no fights from this past weekend to go over, and I didn't make a recap video for 303 the week that, or I guess the week after it finished. So I'm just going to talk about those fights real quick, go over anything that happened. Won't be too in depth. I'll kind of just breeze over them. Then I'll just kind of do it like the fights were this past weekend. And then tomorrow I'll have matchmaking, and sometime later in the week I'll do something about the fights this upcoming weekend, UFC Denver. But for now, let's talk about 303 and what happened. Kicking off the night, we had Vinny Oliveira taking on Ricky Simón. I'll read off all of my picks first, just because I didn't do a predictions video for this either. I posted my picks on Twitter. So this first fight, I went Ricky Simón. I went Ray Saruya, Martin Buday, Waterson Gomez, Peyton Talbot, Charles Jourdain, Cub Swanson, Joe Pyfer, Ian Gary, Bueno Silva, Anthony Smith, Diego Lopez, and Jiri Prochazka to get it done this time in the main event. It ended up being, I believe, I don't have all the numbers right next to me right now, but I believe my worst pick night of the year. We went 6-7, so the first negative event, or maybe I tied. I might have one other event where I got one more wrong than right, but unfortunate. We'll do better this week. But like I said, I did pick Ricky Simón against Vinny Oliveira after Vinicius did get, or not after, but before Vinicius did go out there and get it done versus Ricky Simón. It was a very impressive performance. Only his second UFC fight. And my thinking there was just after watching the Sopaj fight again, or Sopai, I'm not sure how you say it, against a smaller guy, and maybe not as traditional of a wrestler as Ricky Simón. He was out there getting takedowns. He looked good through the first 2 rounds, was dominating. I thought Ricky Simón was going to be able to go out there and do the same. Maybe not have the same kind of control time, but like the rinse and repeat takedowns, get up, go back down, get up, go back down, and just absolutely tire him out. And maybe look for the arm triangle late, maybe find a TKO on the ground late, but Vinny Oliveira was all over it. He looked massive in the cage and just shut down everything Ricky Simón was trying to do and beat him up on the feet for the rest of the, or not the rest, but the whole 3 rounds. It was a very good performance. It'll be interesting to see who he gets next after such a big jump in only your second fight. But I don't want to keep these too long, so we'll move on to the next one. Ray Saruya taking on Carlos Hernandez. I think a lot of people are high on this guy, and rightly so. His grappling looks fantastic. He had, in his one of his road to the UFC fights, it went viral on Twitter, but he had that like reverse guillotine, I don't even know, from the back where he looked like he was ripping this dude's head off. And this fight against Carlos Hernandez, he tries to find the twister, so obviously he's got some very cool grappling once it hits the mat. Good wrestler, or decent wrestler too. Maybe not like elite level wrestling, but he's got some pretty solid wrestling to go with that jiu-jitsu that seems to be pretty exciting and fun. The issue though is his striking does still look quite green on the feet when they were standing for a bit, because Carlos was able to defend takedowns probably the first 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes of the fight, and they had to strike for a little bit, and Saruya looked maybe not the most comfortable. He was winging shots. Maybe he has decent power, but the technique's not quite there. He's obviously still learning that. And then he didn't have too bad of a gassing issue this fight, or we saw him do decent against Klomako on road to the UFC. But there are times when he can slow down if it is a high-paced fight where the guy's defending takedowns or getting up from the takedowns. And so obviously those can be some issues going forward, but overall it was a fun performance. Like it's a good prospect. He looks like he can win some fun fights. I do think he will see some issues when he gets a guy he can't take down and has good striking though, or at least is a more dangerous striker than Carlos Hernandez, because Hernandez, while he may have some good boxing combos, quick hands, he's not the most dangerous striker, so wasn't really able to take advantage while it was up on the feet early, but it is what it is. The next fight, Martin Buday, Andrei Arlovsky. I'm not even going to talk about this one. Andrei Arlovsky's no longer in the UFC. He's really, really starting to look his age now. We saw it in this fight. And Martin Buday, you know what you're going to get from him. He's a probably the GOAT of cage pushing in the UFC. Maybe not doing it at the highest level, but who consistently goes to that game plan over and over and sticks to it throughout the fight. That is Martin Budai's bread and butter. And when cage pushing is your bread and butter, that's not a good thing. So he was able to go out there, get the split decision win. He probably should have gotten the unanimous decision, but when that's the way you fight, these are the kind of results you get. Close split decisions that should not be close split decisions. But regardless, Martin Budai gets the win, and he's somehow 5-1 in the UFC. Obviously not fighting the highest level of competition, and got smoked by Shamil Gaziev, who everyone shouted fraud check after his last loss. So I don't know. Budai's got some work to do for sure. And next up, last early prelim, Michelle Waterson-Gomez took on Jillian Robertson. And this one, it was going to go one way or the other. Michelle Waterson-Gomez was going to defend takedowns and piece her up on the feet, or Jillian Robertson was going to be able to get those takedowns and look for the sub throughout the fight or get the decision. And that's what we got. Jillian Robertson was able to get those takedowns, just a lot of control time, 12 minutes of control time, and 12 and a half minutes of control time in a 15-minute fight. Couple 30-27s, a 30-26, and Michelle Waterson-Gomez retires. Obviously, maybe she didn't reach. I guess she did. I mean, she fought in the UFC. I was going to say maybe she didn't reach the highest level, but she fought in the UFC. She did it against some good fighters. Maybe didn't win all the time at the highest level, but has some good wins under her belt. Fought some good girls. Was one of the pioneers in women's MMA. So good career. Had some fun fights, and Jillian Robertson gets the dub. She gets to progress. I can't remember. Let me see what her fight was before this, Jillian Robertson. I can't quite remember what she did before this. Before this was the Polyana Vienna win. So she's riding 2 in a row now after that loss to Tabitha Ricci. 4 in her last 5. She's looking all right currently. Next up, though, opening prelim fight, Peyton Talbot. The next star everybody's looking at, and he looks like he could be taking on Yanis Gamori. Obviously, this was maybe not an alley-oop. Maybe Yanis Gamori should do more with this opportunity than he did, make it a tougher fight, show a bit more of himself. But Peyton Talbot comes out there, hits him with the first thing he throws right down the middle, just a kind of like a 1 to get him looking, and a 2 straight down the middle off of Yanis Gamori throwing a leg kick, puts him down. Gamori can't get back up. Peyton Talbot throws a little ground and pound. This kid looks like he could be for real, and I honestly think this is a step down in competition level, at least from what we've seen from them so far in their UFC careers. Yanis Gamori's 0-2, 2 TKO losses, and the one against William Gomez. I don't even know what to say about that. And then Cameron Simon is at times looked like he could be. I mean, he is still a good prospect. He's had some bumps in the road recently, but yeah, so kind of a step down in competition for Peyton Talbot. But they just want to keep him fighting, get him some good experience. He came into the UFC with maybe not the deepest record out of A1 combat, or is Uriah Faber's Uriah Faber's is A1. That's where he had the belt before. But yeah, I mean, it did what he was supposed to do in this kind of alley-oop layup fight, and now he calls out Adrian Yanez. Maybe we'll get to see that later. He said, I haven't seen anything about Yanez being scheduled. Peyton Talbot said he is, or at least there's something in the works for it, so maybe they both get in another fight before then, and then we see him face off in December, and that would be Peyton Talbot's first, true tested guy in the UFC, because Simon's a good win, but not really tested yet. And Yanez has been in there with ranked guys, Rob Font, and he's got a decent little list of wins there. Next up, Jean Silva. I don't know I think it's probably Jean Silva because he's Brazilian, but taking on Charles Jourdain, who actually Jean Silva fights this weekend in UFC Denver, so we had the week off because there was no fight card, and now he's getting right back in at a weight class up in his third fight against Drew Dober. So pretty impressive stuff there. It'll be very interesting to see how he does. I'm still figuring out some of these fights for this upcoming weekend, but in this fight, down a weight class from what he's fighting at this weekend, so he was at featherweight against Charles Jourdain, obviously, but he goes in there and he looked like too physical, too powerful. He didn't really show respect for anything Jourdain was throwing back at him. He kind of just plodded forward and just everything about him was too much for Jourdain. It looked like the punching power, the physicality, the size, the aggression. It was all just too much. He just kept backing Jourdain up, hit him with some good shots, and put him down for a round 2 KO. Good performance. Like I said, he goes in there untouched, gets the job done, and now he gets a huge opportunity this weekend. It'll be interesting to see if he can take advantage. Next up, a split decision win for Andre Fili over Cub Swanson. This was a close one. I picked Cub Swanson in the moment during the fight. I thought he had done enough to win, but it's not one where I would go around crying robbery. It was a really close fight. I have to watch it again if I really want to be able to say robbery. In the moment, I thought Cub Swanson won, but it was a very close fight. Neither of them really separated themselves in a way that could make it to where you could call robbery if either one won, for whoever lost. But yeah, I thought Swanson won, but again, not convincingly enough to be mad about it. And Andre Fili gets to move. I think this was his bounce back after the Danny Ige knockout, so he's got one under his belt now. He's kind of always been floating around that like 20 to 30 range, right outside the rankings. So if he can get a win or two more, he'll be looking to try and get back in the rankings like he did with Danny Ige. Next up, last prelim fight, Joe Pyfer coming back for revenge after the Jack Hermanson loss, taking on Marc-Andre Barriault, and he did what he was supposed to do. Marc-Andre Barriault is a good, tough guy. I mean, you know the things people say about him when his fights are coming up. Good cardio, isn't afraid to brawl, tough, will make it dirty for the distance. So a lot of the times you've got to get him out of there early. Some people were worried about Joe Pyfer gassing because we kind of saw that against Jack Hermanson, but this was 3 rounds, and I don't kind of think this is just a lower level than Joe Pyfer. I think Marc-Andre Barriault is a good, decent fighter, but if Joe Pyfer is who the MMA world thinks he could be, and has shown the skills he has, this is a guy you should be able to go out there and beat. And after trying to get into the rankings and failing, this was a great bounce back win. A good guy who you go out and put out in the first round, put out cold. That's what you're supposed to do. Proves you were where you were. People were screaming fraud check. You're going to lose to the top guys. I mean, and not everyone. There are exceptions, but it's a crazy sport, and I think Joe Pyfer did exactly what he needed to do this weekend, putting Marc-Andre Barriault out cold, proving he's still in there. He's still in and around the rankings, I'd say. Or not in the rankings, but right outside of the rankings. A couple more, a win or two, and he can get another attempt, I'd say. Next up, a big one. This was very split down the middle. The odds showed it. It was a pick'em fight going into it. Ian Machado Gary, Michael Venom Page. And I was back and forth all week. In my head, after watching tape, what kept playing was MVP kind of freezing Ian Gary and jumping in with one of those blitzes and putting him down with the right hand. The Song Kenan knockdown against Ian Gary will always kind of play in the back of my mind when his fights come up against guys who can put your lights out. So that was kind of holding me back all week, but in the end, the leg kicks were always going to be there for Ian Gary, even though he didn't really use them, but this was just why I went with Ian Gary beforehand. The leg kicks were always going to be there. He could have used them, and obviously Michael Venom Page has stuff he sets up off of people throwing leg kicks, but it was there for Ian Gary to work with if he wanted it. I thought that could have played a big way for Ian Gary to get the win if he used that well, and also what he did. The grappling was always there. I thought he could go out there and wrestle and at least win minutes like he did, and it was a close fight. Some people thought Michael Venom Page won that last round. Neither of them really did anything until Ian Gary got the takedown. I think Michael Venom Page maybe landed one decent punch, but nothing crazy that, in my opinion, swung it for Page. I thought the grappling for maybe the last 2.5 minutes of the round was enough. He had the back. Good work from Ian Gary, and he's gonna get a step up here, because the Michael Venom Page fight was kind of weird. Obviously, it's a cool fight for the names, but it was like a step back from where he was in the rankings. But obviously, he'll get to look up again now. This didn't really do anything for him, but he should get a really tough opponent next that'll really push him to try and get that way. It'll really push him hard in that fight, I think. Whatever he gets next, whether it's JDM or Shavkat, there are some real good fights for him up next. But next up on 303, we had Macy Chasson versus Mayra Bueno Silva. Bueno Silva looking for the bounce back win after losing the belt, or not losing the belt, but losing the fight for the title. It was vacant at that point against Raquel Pennington. She comes in, and she didn't really have much for Macy. It was back and forth. They were both slinging. I don't really remember this fight too well. But Macy Chasson ends up slicing her open bad with an elbow, and the doctor stopped it after that. There was really nothing they could do. The cut was bad. I think it was a fine stoppage. It was unfortunate, but yeah, Macy Chasson sliced her open, and they kind of had to stop it. There was not much else they could do. Bueno Silva was mad, but like I said, what can you do in that situation if you're the ref or the doctor? Next up, light heavyweights, a really weirdly put together fight. Anthony Smith, Roman Dolidze at light heavyweight. It started out like Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree, and somehow we end up here with a guy not even in the weight class and Anthony Smith. And it was it was a really bad performance from Anthony Smith to go out there and get outstruck by Roman Dolidze for most of the fight. Roman Dolidze had one takedown for 3.5 minutes of, I don't know if I can't remember if all the control time came from that. There's probably a little bit of cage pushing in there somewhere, but 3.5 minutes of control time, one takedown. He didn't really go to the grappling like I think people thought he would if he was going to win, or like land like a huge clubbing overhand to knock him out, but he went out there and outworked Anthony Smith on the feet for 3 rounds and got the win, which if it was taking place on the feet, Anthony Smith probably should have had the advantage there. So this is just a bad look. I know it was short notice, but it was short notice for both guys. Not a good look for Anthony Smith, losing to a smaller guy from a smaller weight class, who's not typically a striker when you are a decent striker at the very least. Next up, Dan Ige, Diego Lopez. This was insane. We all know what played out here. It was Diego Lopez versus Brian Ortega on short notice. Diego Lopez gets the call from Ortega that they need to go up a weight class, so they do. Ortega pulls out day of. Dan Ige gets the call 2, 3, 4 hours before the actual fight takes place. He answers that call like a badass, like a gangster. Fight moves up weight classes again. We're at a catchweight now, 165. They both reweigh in, and I'm calling Dan Ige a gangster. Diego Lopez is a gangster as well because he went out there, put on a sick fight, obviously slowed down a little bit in that 3rd round, but what are you going to do? 2 changes of weight class. He had said that when he got the call that they were moving the weight class up to 55 initially, he had already cut most of the weight down to 45, so he cut weight, had to regain it. Dan Ige didn't have to cut. The whole situation was crazy. The fight was crazy. I would have given this fight of the night. Like objectively speaking, I think Dana White went with Andre Fili, Cub Swanson, because these 2 dudes probably got a bag from Dana White just on the side for all the stuff they had to go through and doing what they did to get this fight put together. So I think that's why the other guys got fight of the night, because these guys were already getting paid. But if all the situation hadn't surrounded this, I would have given this fight the fight of the night easily. It was a banger. And then we were blessed with the main event, Alex Pereira, Jiri Prochazka 2. Prochazka, I don't know, I always switch back and forth with what I say, but I picked Jiri. The mindset looked right. I picked him in the first fight. Watching back the first fight, Pereira didn't really do much or land anything until or with the hands, I will say. He didn't do anything or land anything big with the hands until the shot that put Prochazka down, and obviously that's always the thing that can happen with Alex Pereira. But the leg kicks, Pereira was dealing them bad for Prochazka in the first fight. I thought he was going to be able to maybe not deal with that, but withstand it at least like he did in the first fight. And Jiri Prochazka maybe not landing huge shots in that first fight, but he was getting through. He was figuring out ways to get through, and I thought that mixed with the grappling that he showed in the first fight too, over a prolonged fight would prove good for him. But man, I've got to stop picking against Alex Pereira, no matter who it is, what the circumstances are. It doesn't seem to matter. I picked against him both times in the Jiri bouts, and I was proven wrong bad both times. So I think you've just got to pick Poatan until he gets proven wrong at this weight class, at least. And it'll be crazy to see if he gets the fight at heavyweight. But in this fight, drops Jiri right at the end of that first round with the check left hook. And I don't know if Jiri thought the ref called the fight or something, but he was like waving. I think he was obviously got flash knocked out or dropped, so he probably wasn't all the way there. Thought the fight ended. They get back up. They come out. I doubt Jiri is still all the way there, even after a minute of recovering. That Pereira left hook is something different. They come out, tap gloves, stand across from each other, and Pereira just unleashes a disgusting head kick, puts Jiri Prochazka down, gets a couple ground and pound shots off, and that's the fight. Alex Poatan, and still, this dude is insane. I can't wait to see what he does next. I'll talk about who I think he should fight next, because there are a couple options that are out there that people are talking about, but I'll tell you my opinion tomorrow. This card was awesome. I can't wait for Denver. It's not the craziest card, but at least we get something this weekend after nothing last weekend. I will have matchmaking out tomorrow, something out for UFC Denver later in the week. But yeah, see you guys tomorrow. Peace.